recall, inheritance is a relationship, or is an relationship. So my Hi Everybody class is an applet because I've extended it. Now here I showed you earlier how to create colors and fonts. So I created a color in my own font, papaya. I'm fond of Hawaii, so I like papaya. And check it out. Here I'm utilizing both the init method and the paint method. And what am I doing in the init method? Remember, the init method is where your initialization code goes. So you could set things like the size of the applet, the background color, and the foreground color. And I went ahead and set my size using the resize method. I set my background color to papaya, which I created, and I set the foreground color to red. Now, when I want to draw the applet, when I want to configure what's visually being displayed, I use the paint method. And the paint method requires a single argument of a graphics, and I just called it G. And if we look this up in the documentation, the public void paint, this comes exactly right out of the documentation. You must pass to it a single G graphics object. Here is where I configured my font, and I used the drawString method to go ahead and type out Hi Everybody, and then I specify the coordinates basically of where I want that to go. Okay, so that's what the Java looks like for this. Then what you do is you compile the Java and you get a .class file. So now let's visit with the HTML in order to necessary in order to show you this to a web page. So I'm going to go to my file and let's say open, and I'm going to find that one HTML page, and I'm looking for Java here, so let's look for HTML. This HTML page contains all of the HTML that I'm producing. So I'm going to move this down, and I want to focus in on this. This is the first one here that I'm calling. Actually, I am calling the Hi Everybody, so it is this one. So let me kind of clear this up a little bit. The good news is that the HTML for them is fairly the same, except for one little example that I'll kind of separate for you. I use the applets HTML parameter, or the applet HTML tag, to do it. And I specify a width and a height. And then I use the code attribute to direct the browser to the .class file. Notice I have to specify the .class. Now, this kind of differentiates a little bit, because normally when we were running command-line applications, we didn't use the .class file. But I have to pass the whole full file extension, Hi Everybody.class, to Internet Explorer's Java Virtual Machine so it knows how to run it. Now, if for some reason my web browser doesn't display or support HTML, or Java, I use the alt tag to say simply, your browser is not displaying Java, which is fine. So it's just a good thing. And then also, if you don't support the applet tag, then I said your browser does not support Java 2. So just kind of a backup. It's just a nice little friendly thing to do. Nothing too amazing there. But that HTML goes ahead and gives me this Hi Everybody. You can see my font is red. That's the foreground color. This is the nice papaya color that I have. Alright, let's take a look now at how we can make a little bit more of an advanced applet using things like threads. So let me go ahead and close this Hi Everybody here, and let's go to my file menu, and I'm going to open up my clock applet. So let's look for the .java file that makes up the clock, and true to its form, I am going ahead and I'm importing the necessary packages to create this applet. I need java.awt and applet, and I am using the java.util class because if you remember when we worked with dates before, I went ahead and I needed the date class. Now here's my public class clock, which has to extend applet, but because I'm going to be using threads, I want to implement runnable. Okay, so I configure a font and a date and a thread class. Okay, I have my font, date, and thread variable, if you will. Now, in the init method, here's what I'm doing. In the init method, I'm simply setting the size. Okay, very straightforward. I'm setting the size in the init method. In the paint method, I'm setting the font, drawing the font, or drawing my D, which you'll see here is my date, to the .to string of it to a specific region. Now here comes all the threading work. And the good news is we've talked about this earlier in the threading. Remember, we have the public void start method, public void stop, and the public void run method. And these methods are all necessary, are all very necessary in order to make threads work. Let's check it out. The public void run method, the code that I want to operate inside of my thread, I go ahead and put in the run method. So while true, I create an infinite loop that basically recreates a date object, repaints the screen, sleeps it for 1,000 milliseconds, and catches the necessary interrupted exception. And I did a digital clock before you earlier, too, using a method similar to this when we talked about swing. Now what I'm doing here is I'm testing to see if my runner, which is my thread, is null. If it's null, then I'm basically going to go ahead and create a new thread. If it's not null, I'm going to go ahead and start it. So this is a nice little shortcut syntax here. The bottom line is that I use the D method, or the D object, rather, my date object, and I use that D.to string, okay, to go ahead and put that into the graphics drawString method. So that's what's giving me the date. All this threading code is making the clock run. Again, the HTML for it is very familiar. Here's the clock, and it's basically I copied and pasted this exact line, but the only thing